I just want to very quickly bring your attention back to the 12-month roadmap that we set out at the very start of the course. So you should now have hopefully joined the community and you have watched through all of the course content in chronological order up until this module of course. And you have also watched the technical analysis module at least a minimum of 3 times through to actually make sure that you have given yourself and your subconscious the chance to actually absorb as much of the information as possible. You have practiced the technical analysis exercises and compared them to the walkthroughs, and you have asked any questions that you may have had to fill in any remaining gaps in your knowledge. And of course also requested chart feedback when applying each of the concepts that you have just learned before finally starting to create and build out your first draft of a trading plan that actually fits your unique personality but also your current schedule. So congratulations, you have now graduated from the building phase, and if you have completed all of those steps, then you should now be ready to begin the testing phase. Because there are 3 basic levels of knowledge, and the first level is when an idea is presented to you by someone else. So someone tells you something, you evaluate it against your own opinions. You might have mixed feelings about this information. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, maybe you don't really know what to make of it all just yet. But you now have a basic level of awareness. So the second level is when you become convinced that what you have been told is true. So now it's a belief. A belief is stronger than an idea, but it is not the strongest level of knowledge. The third level is a knowing. This is the most powerful form of awareness, as this is the knowledge that you carry within yourself. It is what you know to be true because you have experienced it firsthand. And this is when you discover the objective truth, and this is what we embody here at Photon. So all of you will now be at least level 1 as you've gone through the course modules up until this point, consumed the information and received many ideas that have been presented to you. Maybe you will move them to the second level when you become convinced that what you have learned is true as you've started to practice and apply the concepts. And then as you accept and you embody these ideas and you incorporate them into your trading, they will become part of your body of knowledge, instinctive, automatic, and unquestionable. Your goal is to achieve the third level of knowledge, a knowing that can only be acquired through practice and personal experience. And the quickest way to achieve this is through extensive testing of your strategy. The only way that you will have extreme confidence in your plan is when you have put in the work to prove it to yourself, that it does have a strong edge and you have seen it successfully play out again and again and again and again and again over a large sample size of trades. Because that's when the majority of psychological errors will start to dissipate when you achieve that third stage of knowledge. Now, in baseball, when the batter hits the ball, how does the fielder know when and where to run? Because the fielder must take into account the direction and the speed of the ball, the curvature of fall, wind speed and direction, initial velocity, rate of progress and decrease in velocity. But he doesn't just think about any of this, he just runs. So the fielder knows where and when to run by subconsciously processing visual information. This is a process backed by millions of years of evolution, and we've been making calculations on the fly based on visual inputs since the dawn of time. Now, by testing historical price action, this is how we gain the experience and we prime our subconscious to be able to react instinctively to the visual price action in a live market. Almost to the point where, we don't even think about it anymore. We just almost make these decisions automatically. You don't think about walking, do you? You don't think about bending your knee, placing your foot out, swinging your opposite arm forward to help you balance out. You're not consciously thinking about any of that when you're walking down the road. You just do it. And that is what the fourth stage of competence is, remember? Where we are unconsciously competent. Everyone starts weak, but mastery comes from putting in the reps. You cannot beat nature. There are just certain things that you can't skip. So if you want to become an outlier, then repetition is your friend. Amateurs assume that they don't need to practice. Beginners practice until they get it right, but professionals practice until they cannot get it wrong. Now, I'm sure some of you may have heard this before, but its application to trading is just as explicitly true. So if we know it's important, and if we know it's going to rapidly improve our trading, how can we make testing a regular habit? How do we incorporate it into our daily routine? How do we stay motivated to do it so it doesn't get overwhelming and you just end up becoming like a boring chore? How do we make our processes feel like play rather than work? Why is it that some people can stick with their habits, but most struggle to stay motivated? So how do we design habits that pull us in rather than ones that just end up, fading away with time? Well, fortunately, scientists have been studying this question for a very long time. And one of the consistent findings is that the way to maintain motivation and to achieve peak levels of desire is to work on tasks of just manageable difficulty. Why is that? Well, the Goldilocks rule states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of their current abilities. Not too hard, not too easy, but just right. If it's too easy, then we're in the tail on the left-hand side of the graph, and we just get bored and we switch off and we don't bother executing the task at hand at all. But on the flip side to that, if it's too hard, then we're in the tail on the right-hand side, and it will start to feel overwhelming, and then the anxiety will just become too great, and again, we will fail to execute the task at hand. The human brain loves a challenge, but only if it is within an optimal zone of difficulty. If you love tennis, and let's say you try to play a serious match against a 4-year-old, you're going to get bored pretty quickly, right? It's going to be way too easy for you, and you'll hopefully win every point. But in contrast to that, if you were to play a professional tennis player, like, Roger Federer or Serena Williams, you will probably quickly lose motivation because that match is just going to be way too difficult for you. You're probably not going to be able to even return their serve. Now, consider playing tennis against someone who is your equal. As the game progresses, you win a few points and you lose a few. You have a good chance of winning, but only if you really try. So your focus narrows, all of the distractions fade away, and you find yourself fully invested in the task at hand. This is a challenge of just manageable difficulty, and it's a perfect example of the Goldilocks rule. Anywhere on that curve that is outside of that orange zone is essentially failure. We need to make sure that we are operating in that Goldilocks zone at all times when we are testing our strategy. You need to be performing a task where there are just enough victories to keep you motivated, but it's still difficult enough where you are making enough mistakes to keep working hard, to improve on and get better at it so you can reach the next level. You can have all of the good intentions in the world to do something, but if it's just too hard or overwhelming for you, eventually you're going to give up or just avoid it altogether, right? So this is why I've split up the testing phase into 3 separate stages, or exercises if you will, that are pretty much laid out in the order of the level of difficulty. So that way, you don't just jumping into the deep end with pure back testing straight away, because this can be extremely hard and overwhelming, and it very likely will not be effective when you are first starting out, or in the early stages of testing a new plan. Now, as you've probably seen, I'm going to go through each of these steps in detail over the next few lessons, but just to give you a very brief overview of what they entail now. So the first stage is building out your case studies, and in pretty simple terms, this is just where you're going to look on the chart of the pair that you trade, obviously, and you would start looking at the higher time frames. You'd identify, a key area or a turning point where a price move was initiated from. So for instance, if you're looking at the 4-hour chart, you're going to start looking at all of those 4-hour higher lows or lower highs, right? And then you will dig into that specific higher time frame move, but obviously on the lower time frames. So you can essentially just re-engineer and deconstruct that move to see how you could have, how could you have traded that and got into that and managed that with your current trade plan. So at this point, you're kind of just sense checking that what you have written down and you've got in your plan, does it actually allow you to get into trades? So on the lower time frame, you're going to look for your entry model. You're going to see how the trade played out, see the different ways that you could have managed it, with the benefit of perfect hindsight, right? Because you're going to see all of the price action, and you're just going to mark up and you're going to annotate the chart on all of the relevant time frames, and then you will write up a full trade recap, so like a trade review, as if you had actually taken and executed that trade. Basically, this is just a really effective way to test and to quickly get experience with your strategy and your plan, and to quite quickly see, maybe any rules that need adjusting, or even rules that you need to add into or even remove from your plan. And you're just going to collect loads of these sort of case studies so that you actually straight away are building a collection of examples where you're starting to prove to yourself that your plan does in fact actually have a decent edge. And of course, you will be refining your plan as you are going along. So then you'll be ready to start forward testing. Now, forward testing is essentially where you are looking at live price action, and in a way, you're sort of trading it, but not live, because you're just going to mark up the charts sort of as they print. You can whack on your risk to reward tool to see how the trades played out, etc. But you can also do this with the benefit of hindsight too. So, say at the end of a trading session or the full trading day, or if you're a swing trader, maybe at the end of the trading week, you'll go back through that day or that week's price action, and again, you'll just annotate and mark up the charts. Just to really understand, why did price move the way that it did that day, and more so, how could you have capitalized on that potentially, and what was the best way to manage those trades, and maybe how you could have potentially avoided any losses, things like that. Now, I personally find this way to be an extremely effective way of gaining experience, sort of rapidly improving your understanding of your strategy, and just being able to read price action effectively by making those observations every single day. I really think it's the best way to kind of build that sixth sense of anticipating price moves before they happen. And you're essentially going to be doing this for kind of the rest of your careers. I still do it every day. As I've done my trading day for the day, at the end of the day, I'll then recap it, go through the price action, mark it up, and you'll just see how I could have done things better, or try and learn any things or spot any patterns that potentially I haven't been picking up on before. And then finally, you'll be ready for the third phase, which is kind of pure backtesting. So this is essentially where you will replay price back to a certain time, and then you will slowly play it forward, so that you were trying to simulate a live market environment, but obviously trading historical price action. Now, the reason why we do this last is this stage can be quite hard. So you need to have an extremely good understanding of your strategy, and ideally have a very solid and refined trading plan at this point, that you really understand it and you believe that it has an edge, because you've already proven that with your case studies and forward testing with your daily and weekly markups. So in my opinion, backtesting is really good for testing your actual skill set of you executing your plan and just getting more experience with it, rather than necessarily collecting hardcore data to look for tweaks and improvements to your plan, if that makes sense. So when you are backtesting, you kind of already want to have a plan that you are very happy and confident in, and now you're kind of using backtesting just to practice executing it kind of without risking money, essentially. So you're just trying to kind of practice in that simulated environment, right? Now, at some point during those 3 stages, you will feel comfortable to start demo trading alongside your testing. There isn't really any sort of right or wrong time to do this. It's going to depend on each individual trader. But kind of as a rough kind of guideline, I would say that you need at least 20 case studies or a month's worth of markups before you start to try and trade it. Because I just think you can just end up knocking your confidence and just slowing your overall progression if you kind of dive in and start trying to trade it too early before you really have a good understanding of your plan and kind of what you're trying to do. And before you've actually had enough time to really test your plan and refine it first before you start trying to execute it in a live market. Then this will also be a really good stage to consider any one-on-one coaching sessions, just if you feel like you need some help correcting any remaining errors in your approach, and I can help you go through your data and just put those extra refinements to your plan and your overall edge before you're then ready to start the next phase of tackling live trading. Okay, so that's essentially the outline of the next phase of your journey, the testing phase. So over the course of the next few lessons, we're going to look at exactly how you can perform each of these steps so that you will develop a really solid trade plan and develop that extreme confidence in your own unique edge.